Adam, so much of the conversation over the last couple of days has been around AI.
Yep.
Really, the whole idea that AI is going to take care of a lot of the issues in our industry. And it feels like if we go back to when we first started having events in 2018, it was blockchain. It's now moved on to AI. How real is AI?
Yeah, I think it's very real. I think technology definitely goes through hype cycles. You brought up blockchain as an example of a technology that maybe fizzled out or maybe hasn't fully yet met its promise. I've been doing machine learning, statistics, AI, whatever you want to call it, for 20 years, and that's gone through previous hype cycles. And I think when a lot of professionals like myself saw LLMs come out, we kind of rolled our eyes and we're like, okay, this is the latest hype cycle. But I definitely think there's going to be sticking power to this one. There'll certainly be companies and technologies and use cases that don't pan out. That happens when there's any new adoption of technology. But I think 10 years from now, AI is definitely going to be here to stay and far more integrated into our businesses than it is today.
So I'm looking right at my CTO, Daniel Pickett, who I love to pick on, no pun intended. And he is an AI skeptic, not because I think he doesn't believe that the technology is real, but more because so many people use the term AI to describe almost everything.
Yep.
In technology that may be machine learning, it may just be a simple sort of algo that founders and startups and even big corporations use the word AI because it's sort of they don't have to explain the magic at that
Sure.
point. How much of that is going on versus actually truly fundamental shifts in the world?
So AI is not a very well-defined term. Like researchers in the community, like they'll debate the exact definition of AI. The definition of AI that I kind of rely on is a computer system that does activities that traditionally a human could only do. So I take a pretty loose definition of it, and I actually don't think debating whether a use case is AI or not is actually really valuable. I think, Ben had the expression yesterday, like you need to go where there's customer pain, and I think, as you think about your businesses, you should be figuring out like what are the pain points, what are the problems I'm trying to solve, and AI could be a solution to those, but non-AI could also be a solution to those, and I don't think one's intrinsically better than the other.
AI has been a lot, and I've talked about this a number of times over the last couple of days, is that media businesses are one of the primary examples of where AI is being used in an actual application layer.
Yep.
And a lot of media executives, journalists are all worried about what AI means to their business because the cost to produce content is effectively gone to zero.
Yep.
My son, who when he was 16 years old was running an e-commerce site and he was using AI to do descriptions on products that he
Sure.
knew very little about. I use it for copy editing. That's the obvious case. The ChatGPT case is sort of obvious to a lot of people. But when we talk about AI in business intelligence and applications like what you guys do at Uptake, where are the real opportunities?
Sure. One of the big opportunities we're seeing right now is around large language models or LLMs, which I'm sure everyone's heard about, probably using in some form. There's a lot of really interesting applications of those for fleets. So one area where we use LLMs a lot today is reading and classifying work order data. So a lot of the data about a truck that you really care about gets stored in these maintenance systems, but a lot of the really valuable content can be in the comments, can be in the notes and the messages that go back and forth. And taking that data and putting it into a structured form to inform other use cases is really, really valuable. So for example, we'll have algorithms that'll read work orders. And like, let's say, it was coded as a coolant pump issue, but in the comments they're talking about the brakes or something like that. We can flag it and say, hey, we suspect maybe just somebody mistyped something here. Maybe this was actually a braking related issue on the truck. Clean that up, surface that back up to the users. That enriches the data for their own reporting perspective and understanding, hey, how much am I spending on brakes? And it makes better labels for us to do machine learning to predict failures and things like that.
So at the end of the day, the difference between AI and machine learning is pretty thin in terms of the general definition.
Yeah, I wouldn't spend any time at all kind of distinguishing between those from a functional
I
perspective.
mean, effectively Google, since their sort of birth the early forms of search,
Yep.
versions of search, were effectively using what today we would recognize as language learning models.
Yeah, the thing that's changed that maybe is worth clarifying. So historically, when you were interested in building an AI, machine learning, again, whatever you want to call it, application, you were starting with your own data set. You're cleaning it up. You're running some type of regression or classification algorithm on it, and you were productionalizing it. The thing that's really changed with ChatGPT, Llama, all these models that comes out, is you can now get these pre-trained, pre-built models that are extremely powerful, and then just kind of tune them or tweak them on your specific data set versus having to start from scratch and really train one of these on your own data set.
Because they've been trained on just trillions of data points.
Yeah, I mean, the modern large language models are basically trained on the entirety of written human content.
Which is, it's amazing because I was listening to a CNBC episode or morning talk about NVIDIA, but they were also talking about ChatGPT and the fact that the new version, I guess version 5 or 4 something, was not a significant leap. Is basically they've run out of data to train these models on.
Yeah. There was a funny anecdote where so ChatGPT won't reveal what specific data sources they train their data on, and there was some question whether they were trained on YouTube videos or not, and whether that violated some of Google's copyrights. And then there were cases where the LLMs would ask you to please like or subscribe, just like the end of a lot of YouTube videos. So some people said that was evidence that they were, trained on those videos as well, because they ran out of written content, so they started transcribing all the video.
On video, and video, the amount of content that is produced on video is exponentially growing every single day, and it's a very rich level of content. I am, as someone who's in media, I use it for copy editing, as I said. I've used it for graphics design, for that. But when we talk about business applications specifically, where, is it taking all of this unstructured data you talked about fleets and trucking, and really applying it to do quick search or identify problems? Where is the big opportunity that's sort of exists today?
Sure. So search is a great application for AI today. If you're a large organization, your data is probably scattered across email, Word documents, Excel files, maybe you have an intranet, several different systems. You're seeing a lot of companies that are kind of unifying that into one spot and creating a portal where you can search across all your different documents and knowledge. My company, we do predictive maintenance. We've been doing that for 10 years, where we're taking data coming off the trucks, merging it with the work order data, and then figuring out what are the issues with your trucks, how do you reduce your unplanned downtime, how do you better optimize your maintenance schedules. There's more and more. I know driver camera is very controversial. Our last speaker talked about that. But they're doing using AI to detect drowsiness, distracted driving, phone usage, seatbelt usage, things like that.
Where is in terms of what your customers specifically are coming to you and saying, if you could solve this problem, we would buy. We would become a big client. Where is the real opportunity that you would say is really top of mind?
We solve one problem for our customers, and that's we reduce unplanned downtime. So how we do that is by leveraging AI, but I barely bring that up with customers. They don't really know. They don't really care. They shouldn't have to care. We help them solve unplanned downtime. So typically we can reduce unplanned downtime 10 to 40%, something in that range. Our customer success team jokes it's a little bit like, we're a little bit like buying a gym membership. Like you have to buy us and use us to see the benefits. But that's the main problem that customers are coming with today.
Isn't the gym membership model like they want you to sign up and never use it? Is that the goal?
Yeah, I guess the analogy breaks down there. We want you to definitely use the software. So
so use it. I'm trying to prevent maintenance downtime.
Yep.
What are the typical things that you find in your models that actually are causing downtime? Like
after treatment, huge issue for customers. Very, very common issue, especially with trucks that idle a lot. Coolant systems, we'll see those as less frequently occurring, but if you have a critical coolant system failure, it can result in a total engine replacement that can be $60,000 or $70,000. Those are some common types of problems that we'll help customers with.
Is it true that a truck or an engine that isn't used as much is actually in worse shape than one that is?
It definitely is an issue where you see excessive idling, and we definitely see a break-in period with the assets. So if you think about a truck's life cycle and the probability of a truck failing, that first day it leaves the factory, it actually has a pretty high probability of failing. That then kind of flattens out over time, and then as the truck ages, it starts to go back up. They call it a bathtub curve. If you think you kind of take the cross section of a bathtub, it starts high, gets flat, and then gets high again.
One of the things that I'm a pilot, and one of the things that that has been written, talked a lot, is the FAA requires annual maintenance.
Yep.
You have to do a full inspection of the aircraft. But one of the things that actually they've discovered in the data is that the most likely time for an airplane to crash is right after that annual.
Oh, fascinating.
Right after a maintenance event, because the mechanic that's working on the aircraft forgets to do something. And that's one of the things that data has started to sort of prove out, is that the regulatory regime in aviation isn't up to date with some of the data. What is it in that you guys have discovered that is really counter to sort of accepted wisdom in the diesel fleet market?
We see something similar where we will definitely see repeated failure patterns on trucks. So very common, you'll be looking at a truck, it's got a bad coolant system, all the alarm bells are going off on the coolant system. You look at the work order history for this thing, and it's been in the shop 3 or 4 times, and they just keep topping it off with coolant and not addressing the root cause of the problem.
And where do you guys tend to find that? Like, what is the actual problem that they're trying to deal with?
It's typically like a leak or like a faulty coolant.
They have a leak and they just keep adding a fluid to it,
Yeah.
and that's not actually solving the issue.
Exactly.
Because the mechanic is looking at it and saying that is the issue, or
they're
doesn't actually care.
The trucks. They're incentivized to turn the trucks and get them back out as quickly as possible.
So what are best practices that people, when they're implementing your solution, what changes from sort of before and after that you're actually helping companies deal with?
Sure. I mean, a lot of customers will come to us and they'll still be very reactionary. Maybe they have a run to fail maintenance program, or maybe they'll be reacting to fault codes, but a lot of times our customers are pretty inundated with the number of fault codes that they see. So, best practice is really to, one, look at what is causing unplanned downtime for your fleet, identify where are those hot spots, and put a number to it. There sometimes can be an incentives issue where the dispatchers are incentivized to get the trucks on the road. The maintenance folks are incentivized to reduce maintenance costs, and you kind of need to have numbers so you can balance, hey, what's the cost of downtime for this versus avoiding a future maintenance event, at the same time recognizing, if the truck's in the shop, you're not earning money from that. So, we typically start by analyzing a customer's fleet, understanding where there's unplanned downtime, understanding what that's costing them from a revenue perspective, and try to give them that scorecard to balance those two competing variables.
So it's eliminating the false positives. I mean, I imagine one of the problems with the sensors on all these trucks and just in general equipment is just the amount of false positives that exist, because you're getting, and I have found in my own experience, whether it's my tire monitor on my car, particularly the ones that, on some of the come out maybe 10 years ago when they first introduced the technology.
Yep.
But also like in an airplane, like I had a situation where my alternator light and battery light kept going off, and it kept happening. I thought it was a problem. Mechanic says no problem. Got back in the air. Luckily, I was on the ground when my engine failed.
Wow.
But it was because I was told not to worry about this problem. It was a sensor issue, and they're going to replace the sensor. Turned out that it was an actual problem.
Wow.
Luckily, happened on the ground. I think the false positives actually become counterproductive. Those false sensors. Is your sort of goal to get to a point where you can identify the real faults in the system with AI versus just these constant sort of inundation of alerts?
Yeah, first thing we do when we are looking to add a new insight, insight's what we call, hey, you need to do something about your truck, is make sure we can differentiate between a sensor issue and an underlying issue. So we've been doing a lot of analysis on tire failures. A lot of fleets are instrumenting third-party TPMS devices. They're putting them on the valve stem, or there's some that go directly on the wheel underneath the tire. And the problem is the sensors fail all the time, right? So here's like a pretty common use case. You're a driver, fire up the truck, you get an alert. Hey, right steer tires, low pressure. You get out of the truck, it's cold, you manually check it, and it turns out the sensor just failed, right? So what are you gonna do next time you get an alert that you have low pressure? You're just gonna stop checking it. So it's really important to differentiate between like when there's a sensor failure versus when there's a kind of an underlying root cause failure. I mean, your anecdote with your plane, that's really a worst case scenario where you thought it was a sensor failure and it turned out to actually
My
be
mechanic thought it was to be clear, my
Yeah.
mechanic thought it was a sensor failure. I see an alert where it says your alternator and your battery's bad. As a pilot who reads a lot of accident reports, you know, the difference between a truck or a car is if there's a mechanical issue, you can pull over the side of the road.
Yep,
If your airplane engine fails,
no pulling over.
you're looking for a place to land and hope that it's going to be a soft landing.
Yep.
So I take those sensor issues very serious, but when you're told not to worry about something because this pattern has been there, I think would have been very different because the whole diagnostic element of the aircraft could have been taken into consideration and just wasn't.
Yep.
A mechanic made a bad thing. Like I said, I was lucky my failure happened on the ground. The amount of capital, the amount of money that's wasted on maintenance events. We talk about preventive maintenance. We talked about the fact that, you know, companies have this sort of preventive maintenance with best practices. Feels like a very out-of-date sort of view of maintenance because everyone's sort of following a process that's very sort of about the entire fleet versus the individual
Right.
equipment. Is AI going to solve that?
Potentially. So, you know, you could definitely imagine a world where in the future these trucks are increasingly instrumented with sensors and, you know, instead of changing a fuel filter every, you know, X number of miles or thousands of hours, you change it based on the actual usage patterns of that specific asset and the actual specific health of that. There's a bunch of second order effects that are really challenging though. So what's the implication of that on warranties if you're not following the manufacturer PM schedule? What's the implication on that of liability if, you know, you're saying, hey, we're pushing the PM schedule back a little bit because we think that, you know, this system's healthy and then it has a failure and there's an accident or something like that. I actually think the biggest mistake I see fleets making is they view those buckets of spend independently. They view the maintenance cost in one bucket and they view the revenue in another bucket. And I actually suspect most fleets underspend on maintenance when you take into account the downtime that they're having. So like NPTC says for every hour a truck's out of service, it costs $300, right? So I suspect actually most fleets should be spending a little bit more on maintenance to reduce those unplanned downtime and reduce that foregone revenue.
So it's the preventive maintenance side that actually you feel like is underinvested in.
Yeah.
That they should be invested in.
Yep.
But again, it goes back to what we've talked about is like you're having a truck out of service.
Yep.
It's identifying the actual trucks that that have more issues than others. Is that fair to say, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And that's where AI can help do it.
Yep. So you know, you still need to do your regularly scheduled PMs, but you know, a very common practice we'll see is customers take the truck into the shop for a PM, then they'll pull up our software, see what else they may want to do to the truck while it's in the shop. They've already taken the downtime. The cost to do that incremental repair is substantially less.
Adam, if you sort of made a bold prediction over the next 5 years, what is your bold prediction about whether it's uptakes, business, or the industry? What would you say that is going to change?
I mean, I think AI is definitely in the middle of a hype cycle right now. So, you know, if you think of the classic Gartner hype cycle, you'll see, you know, I forget what they call the peak of it, right? But then at some point the value flattens out, and the bull case, like that value is definitely there. You're going to see a lot more chat interfaces, voice interfaces. You're going to see all that unstructured data that we're all sitting on, work orders, random Excel files, documents, become queryable, identifiable, and all that'll have a positive impact on the industry in general.
Yeah, I think getting all this data in a way that is easy to consume
Sure.
and identifying those issues that could come up will be far more productive than not. And
Yep.
frankly, increase safety, cut cost. And what I think is going to be most interesting is as you guys continue to mine the data, the maintenance data, is learning, like I used the example of the airplane, changing the way fleets think about data that you can't even imagine today.
Yep. Something we're really excited about to start working on, and we haven't done it yet, is really around asset lifecycle. So I talk with a lot of fleets, and you'll hear a lot like, yep, we keep our trucks 4 years, 400,000 miles or something like that. And then you ask them why. And like the best answer is like, well, you know, that's when the warranty ends. Or sometimes you'll hear, you know, somebody did an analysis in Excel 5 years ago. Or a lot of times you'll hear, you know, I've been in the trucking industry 30 years and I just know. And so I think one thing you'll start to see is companies will get a lot more selective about like, okay, you know, this truck's at 4 years, but it's actually a great truck. It's in good health. It's been well maintained. I'm going to keep it 5 or 6 years. And this other truck, you know, it's 3 years old or 4 years old. I'm going to disposition it or get rid of it early.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm excited to see where this goes. I think it's, as you get learnings, we'd love to have you back.
Great.
So
Thank you
appreciate
so
it. Thanks,
much.
Adam.